we'll start with this. Well, I'm sure that most of you have heard by now that Amanda Serrano will be taking on WBC Super Bantamweight champion Jamie Mercado on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley, August 29th. And
listen, man,
I'm just going to be upfront.
Honest.
Just going to get straight to the point.
What?
I don't like the fight. Jamie Mercado is yet another world champion from 122 pounds that Amanda Serrano is fighting at 126 pounds. Trainer and manager extraordinaire from the United Kingdom, Steffi Bull, said, "Another easy win from a fighter a weight below."
There's no other way to look at this fight.
If you know anything about the circumstances, and you know anything about the situation, if you know anything about the fighters, you'll know that Jamie Mercado is very much in over her head with Amanda Serrano, more so than Daniela Bermudez was. Daniela, who Amanda Serrano fought in her last fight, comparatively, Daniela was a more experienced fighter, a more experienced champion in many ways.
Than Mercado.
But she, like Jamie Mercado, was a fighter that campaigns at 122 pounds, not 126. And
I don't like it.
Even Daniela seemed a little bit more adept to the task than Jamie Mercado does here and now.
She did?
I mean, I know that this situation was created by Erica Cruz turning down the unification match with Amanda Serrano. Given how things are working out, I'd wager that the campaign to unify the women's featherweight division is not going to plan, because instead of landing an Erica Cruz fight, and instead of landing a Sarah Mahfoud fight, who Amanda ends up with is Jamie Mercado. And, you know, Amanda can't force those two other champions to fight her. That's the truth. They tried to make the fight with Erica Cruz. They offered a
100 large.
Decent purse, decent-sized purse, and Erica didn't want to know.
Keep points.
This is what you need to understand. Amanda tried to get Jelena Marjanovic in the ring for a unification match, but Jelena didn't want to do it. Afterwards, Jelena gets beat by Erica Cruz, and the Serrano people had hopes that Erica would be more willing to unify than Jelena was. Apparently, that's not the case. Apparently, they're experiencing the same issues with Erica that they were already experiencing with Jelena. Sarah Mahfoud, the IBF champion,
They must not be getting anywhere with her either.
so it's not like Amanda didn't try to find a worthier adversary, a more capable opponent than Jamie Mercado is. She tried. Her people tried. But those girls were unwilling. And in some ways, you could look at this as karma coming back to bite Amanda in the ass for how she behaved with Katie Taylor. Maybe that's what this is. But Amanda did try to get someone more capable than Jamie Mercado is. And that's the truth.
You can feel about it how you want to feel about it.
That Amanda is getting a taste of her own medicine, and you don't pity her for it. Maybe that's how you guys feel about it, but she did try to get the other world champions at 126 pounds in the ring, and they didn't want to do it. It is what it is. Does that make this a good fight? Does that make Jamie Mercado
Adept to the task.
No, it doesn't. That's the thing. Regardless of how we got here, we are here now, and I can tell you, Jamie Mercado is in over her head with Amanda Serrano, because unlike the slack-jawed gawkers and pom-pom wavers that don't know the ball from the bounce, I've seen Jamie in action many times.
She's a young champion.
But she's a young champion at 122, not 126. And her last couple of outings, the Alejandra Guzman fight, more recently, the Angelica Rascon fight.
She's got a lot of holes.
Big ones that the champions at 118 and the champions at 122 pounds could exploit if she were so confronted with one of them. But she is so confronted with Amanda Serrano, who is a lot more experienced than they are and fights at a higher weight than they do.
This is not an even contest.
And that's really what the focal point here is. That's the moral of the story, that while it's not Amanda's fault that she can't get the other champions in the ring, that she can't force those other world titleists at featherweight to fight her, while that's not her fault, that doesn't make Jamie Mercado adept to the task. That doesn't make this an even fight. You might see a lot of people oohing and eyeing at how Amanda handles a Simone de Silva or a Daniela Bermudez, or in this instance, a Jamie Mercado. But these people are largely ignorant to the sport of women's boxing.
They can't tell you who the good fighters are and who the good fighters ain't.
There's two sides to this thing, there are.
Pros and cons.
This is set to go down on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Tyron Woodley. Your typical boxing fan they ain't going to be interested in that card. They're not going to be interested in that match. But given Jake Paul's social media following and Tyrone Woodley's following that he amassed as a mixed martial artist, I'd wager that this card is going to get a lot of eyes. And some of those eyes might happen to catch this fight between Amanda and Jamie. And maybe they'll like what they see, and maybe that will lend itself to Amanda's marquee value, since that's what she's looking to raise these days. She's looking to further develop her profile,
Continue to grow her following.
a big highlight reel knockout over the likes of Jamie Mercado might lend itself to that. I mean, that's how Deontay Wilder ended up with the cult of lunatics that follow him.
Devontae Davis picked on a few little guys.
Before the Mario Barrios fight, you know, guys like Cuellar, guys like Leo Santa Cruz, guys that essentially moved up in weight.
Some people think he hails the moon and the stars for knocking out those kinds of guys.
Now, the trained eye, the trained observer, already knew that none of those fights were even contests. None of those fights were even matchups. The way that this fight isn't an even matchup. You know, that might not stop one or two individuals from taking a liking, taking a fondness to Amanda Serrano if she goes in there and scores a highlight reel knockout over Jamie Mercado. And I think it's highly probable that she does. That's the silver lining. That's the saving grace. That is the positive that you can draw from all of this. The negative is that guys like me and you are looking at this and thinking to ourselves, yet another overmatched opponent. Another overmatched opponent. The only time in recent memory that Amanda Serrano could have been involved in a super fight that was an even contest, an even matchup, well, that's the time that she walked away. The time she walked away from the Katie Taylor fight.
Hey, listen, I want to like her.
She's the hometown fighter from the same city as I am. I want to root for her, but I can't ignore this.
Simone De Silva was overmatched.
So was Diana Santana. So was Daniela Bermudez. So is Jamie Mercado. Hell, she's more overmatched than Daniela was. And I can't ignore that, because when you've been around as long as Amanda has been around, since 2009, roughly 12 years, a little over a decade, roughly 43 professional contests, 43 professional fights, 7 division champion. When you've been around that long, and this is your track record thus far,
There's a standard.
a super fight landed in Amanda's lap just as she was about to leave the sport. I believe that was in 2018. Contracts get signed, and Amanda ends up walking away from it. And to fight who? Overmatched opponents like Simone De Silva, Diana Santana, Daniela Bermudez, and Jamie Mercado? It just is what it is. In other news, per tweet from Ryan O'Hara and his sources, I'm told that the Canelo versus Plant negotiations have been difficult. DAZN is looking into Canelo Triple G 3. Pugmire, first to report, I'm told Canelo is more likely to pick Triple G trilogy over Andrade as a result of the press conference confrontation in May. For those who might be telling themselves that Plant, Caleb Plant, the fighter, champion, is making things difficult, Ryan O'Hara says, it's not Plant that's the issue. Rival networks, my friend. The problem everyone feared. And this is in keeping with what I told all of you months ago when Canelo Alvarez first approached Caleb Plant for a fight. He approached him once, he approached him twice, and this would be the third time, as Caleb holds the final puzzle piece to the super middleweight division. And what Al Heyman and the people over there at the PBC hope to do, perhaps not even Caleb Plant himself, is use that puzzle piece as leverage to walk Canelo Alvarez into some kind of a deal. And therein lies the dilemma. This is not Giovanni Santiago. This is not Juan Montiel. This is not the kind of fighter you get options on. This is Canelo Alvarez, the biggest name in boxing in this part of the world. Al Heyman doesn't want to respect that. Eddie Hearn, on the other hand, he understands that Canelo Alvarez, at this point in his very accomplished and distinguished career, he wants his freedom. And that's why Canelo is still willing to work with Eddie without a commitment, without some kind of an exclusivity deal, because Eddie understands Canelo wants his freedom. Al, on the other hand, and the people over there at the PBC and Fox, they want to monopolize all the talent, and if they can't do that, they'll block fights. Like this one.
They'll freeze fighters out if they have to.
This is everything I told you guys months ago, right down to Triple G being an option for Canelo. Because, you know, you can freeze a Terrence Crawford out. Terrence don't got the options that Canelo does. Canelo Alvarez versus Gennady Golovkin III does the same as, if not better business than Canelo versus Plant, because it's Canelo bringing the paying customers to the table. It's Canelo bringing the fans and the eyes, so on and so forth. He's bringing all of that to the table. Your fighter is not. So if you try to use your fighter as leverage against Canelo, all he's going to do is walk away, do his own thing with someone else, somewhere else. You can't stifle his career. You can't stifle his momentum the way you can with other fighters, because Canelo Alvarez doesn't need a promoter. He doesn't need you.
Or your stable of fighters.
Or your platform. We've known for some time that the people over there at DAZN were very much invested and still are invested in making a Triple G trilogy happen. They've invested a lot of money in that, and I'm pretty sure they're eager to get a return on it.
So if the PBC fucks up the Plant fight,
Canelo Alvarez has that option. That's not the only option that he's got. We've been hearing a lot of talk, a lot of rumblings about a potential return to light heavyweight for Canelo to take on Artur Beterbiev. Artur, who doesn't even have a dance partner right now, since Joe Smith Jr. is working on a 2-fight deal that'll cap off with a Danny Jacobs fight early next year. Artur Beterbiev is in the running for a Canelo Alvarez fight. So is Gennady Golovkin.
so go ahead and block the Plant fight.
Go ahead and cost your fighter that opportunity. What's going to end up happening is Caleb will lose to someone else on your side of the street for less money than he would have made fighting Canelo.
Maybe he loses to David Benavidez.
Maybe he loses to David Morrell, who just smoked Mario Cazares.
He could end up losing to either one of those guys.
But neither one of those guys pays you the way that Canelo Alvarez pays you. Neither one of those fights with neither one of those guys is as big an event as a Canelo Alvarez undisputed super middleweight title fight would be. People at the PBC and Fox, they're not concerned with that, because I reiterate, they'll block a fight if they have to, if they can't get what they want, if they can't monopolize all the talent at a given weight. And Canelo's not going for that.
You can't control him.
I reiterate, this ain't the kind of fighter you got options on. This is the biggest name in boxing in this part of the world. And if you're going to work with him, it's going to be on his terms, or you don't work with him at all.
Now, the part that concerns me and you
is that DAZN is fully capable of staging a Canelo Alvarez versus Caleb Plant fight in their neck of the woods, on their side of things. But the people at the PBC won't send Caleb over.
That seems to be the issue.
DAZN's got it in the budget to pay Caleb Plant a career-high purse that he won't find anywhere else, not even on his side of things. The issue is that the PBC don't care about that. They don't care about Caleb that much. What they care about is charging me and you inflated pay-per-view prices for a fight we could easily see for less on DAZN.
On DAZN, it won't cost me and you an arm and a leg.
So let's say Canelo Alvarez is willing to do a one-off with Fox and the PBC to fight Caleb Plant on their side of things by way of pay-per-view. Yeah, I'd purchase the fight.
If that's how it happens.
But with the PBC, it's never that simple. They want options on this guy like he's your run-of-the-mill boxer, and he's not your run-of-the-mill boxer. You can't paint him into a corner.
Not the least bit surprised any of this is happening.
It's what the PBC's good for. Gouging fans and blocking fights. In addition to that story, confirmed to the Athletic Box by way of Lance Pugmire, recently reached out to Gennady Golovkin to inquire about his availability for a fall fight against Canelo, and the Golovkin response was that he's ready, willing, and available. Official tells me Gennady Golovkin's side has no idea if this is leveraging in the Canelo versus Caleb Plant talks just to check on his fight status or nearing a trilogy bout. I'm told he will likely not fight Demetrius Andrade before his planned December 31st bout against Ryota Murata in Japan. Demetrius Andrade caught wind of this news, reigning WBO middleweight champion Demetrius Andrade, and he says, of course Gennady Golovkin won't fight me. DAZN, make him unify. Tom Loeffler, you don't got enough confidence in your guy. Yeah, this is a direct challenge to Tom. Jonathan Banks and Triple G. Where your balls at? And I feel for Demetrius Andrade, I do, because he keeps getting passed over by everybody. But if what Demetrius is waiting for is for the people over there at DAZN to give his fight with Gennady Golovkin priority over Canelo's trilogy with Gennady Golovkin, well, he's going to be waiting a long time, and he better not hold his breath, because they've invested a lot of money into the career of Triple G on the premise that he'd fight Canelo for a third time. So if they have to choose between him fighting Canelo, him fighting you, they're going to pick Canelo. Everybody's going to pick Canelo.
Over you.
This is why I can't stress this enough, that Jermall Charlo, Demetrius Andrade, those two guys need to fight, because neither of them are a priority to the high rollers at or around these weights. Fighting Demetrius Andrade is not a priority to Gennady Golovkin, Ryota Murata, or Canelo Alvarez. Fighting Jermall Charlo, same deal, same situation.
You got a lot of people these days. They like to pretend they know this business because they got a little following on YouTube, a couple of subscribers here and there. Maybe it's a sizable following.
Maybe.
But unless that following actually represents the paying public, the portion of the public that actually pays for boxing, unless your following is comprised of those individuals, you're singing to the choir, buddy. You're trying to appeal to people that have no effect, don't make a dent in the world of boxing.
Go on with your whatabouters.
Your pom-poms and your propaganda, and get a couple of people to believe you. Unless those people are the kind of people that actually pay for boxing, doesn't matter what they think.
Doesn't matter what you think.
This is reality. Caleb Plant, David Benavidez, Jermall Charlo, how long have those guys been fighting under the PBC banner? How long has Al Heyman had the opportunity to make fights between them so that the paying public would actually be interested in those fighters enough that you can't ignore them? How long has Al Heyman had the opportunity to build those fighters up into somebodies? How long?
Because he still hasn't.
You think you're going to build up excitement for those fighters by matching them against Caleb Truax? Why are we seeing Caleb Plant versus Caleb Truax instead of Caleb Plant versus David Benavidez? Why did we see Jermall Charlo fight Juan Montiel instead of Demetrius Andrade? You think we're going to get excited about those foregone conclusion fights?
Nope.
Here's a newsflash. We're not.
Nope.
And when we don't,
Your fighters are going to be indistinguishable from anybody else's fighters.
mere options to the likes of a Canelo Alvarez. Options that are indistinguishable from each other, none a priority.
Yeah, he wants to go undisputed.
He wants to, but the second you try to use that as leverage against him, he can shift gears, do something else without you. What are you going to do then?